He takes out his license and registration and says that the car isn't his, by the way, which prompts the officer to tell him to get out the car, and then we cut to the police station. Static Shock, Season 1, Episode 8, Sons of the Fathers. Static Shock aired on Kids WB in late 2000. It ran for 4 seasons, and the show was about Virgil Hawkins, a 14-year-old boy who contracted superpowers after exposure to a mutagen gas, those being electromagnetic powers which he would use for the sake of good under his alias Static. The show follows the adventure he and his best friend Richie Foley get into, which involve helping Dakota City for the greater good. It's your typical children's superhero show, to say the least. However, one thing the show was praised for was its approach to social issues. In Season 1, Episode 8, Sons of the Fathers, we get a look as to how the directors wanted to communicate that racism is not only a systemic, old-fashioned problem, but also that it's just wrong. The episode starts off with a group of villains known as the Metabreed invading the local mall and robbing innocent civilians. Then Static comes through to save the day, yada yada yada. You know, it's always funny when heroes wear an eye mask and still aren't recognized. Like, bro, do you even know your son's face or voice?
It's like Clark Kent in the glasses,
A little argument ensues between Richie and Virgil's sister, Sharon. She complains that he's there every day, so much so that he should be paying rent. Virgil defends him and says Richie is welcome to their home any day of the week. Shortly after this, time passes and Virgil says, you know what? My sister's right. We never hang out at your place. And Richie panics, looking for excuses, but doesn't have any. So they agree that on Friday, Virgil can spend the night. We also have a Metabreed subplot going on in the episode, which I'm not going to get too into. Friday night comes along, and Virgil and Richie are hanging out in his room, and it seems Richie planned to specifically invite Virgil when his dad wasn't home, and instead working a night shift. It seems the mom was also in on it too. But then, the living room door opens, and it's revealed Mr. Foley is home early. Virgil says hi, and Mr. Foley ignores him. Then they have an awkward, quiet dinner. You know those awkward dinners where you only hear the forks clanking? I fucking hate those moments. Virgil breaks the silence by telling Richie he brought a rap CD they can listen to later, and Mr. Foley intervenes, saying rap music is garbage and disrespectful. He also says it, quote, tears down everything guys like me built, insinuating, you know, that he's a white man and people that listen to rap most likely aren't. Eventually, Virgil is making his way to the bathroom through the hallway and overhears Mr. Foley talking to Richie's mother, saying, and I quote, and now I see why Richie acts like a hood, Maggie. That kid's a bad influence. All his kind are. It's bad enough I gotta deal with them all day long. Now one of them's in my house. And as any normal human would, Virgil leaves. Shout out.
Alright, man, that was a big deal to me as a kid, bro, because as a kid growing up, like, you understand that you are black, and some people are not gonna like you because you're black, but like, you don't assume that, I don't know, you don't assume like it's really gonna like ever personally happen to you. But like shows like this where they show it in cartoons, like they even show it in cartoons showing that it can happen to a superhero. This nigga is literally Static Shock. He's literally Static Shock, and he still has to deal with it, bro. But I want to know y'all's opinion, man. So if you had a friend and he was your homie, he or she was your homie, it was mad cool, it was mad dope, but their parent was a racist, is that still your friend? So I don't know about y'all. I don't think I could be friends with somebody whose parent is a racist. That's a little too close to me, bro. Because now every single time I'm gonna know that your dad be saying all this like horrible stuff, and you probably just let it slide because you know you're not black. Like what point does it make getting in an argument with your dad? You're not black. Like, are you really gonna die on that hill? Y'all understand what I'm saying? Crazy.
Richie for writing for his homeboy though, because he straight up calls his dad out for being racist and tells him he hates him.
Well, you got what you wanted, Dad. My best friend's gone because of you and your stupid racism. I hate you!
The day after, Virgil gets a phone call from Maggie, Richie's mom, explaining that Richie is missing. She also apologizes, and we can see that the only racist in the house is Mr. Foley. Then we get to see Richie get chased by an armadillo man and a wolf man. Okay, we also get to see Mr. Foley ask Virgil's father for help in a very obnoxious way. He says Richie never mentioned Virgil and his family were black. As annoyed as Mr. Hawkins is, he's still willing to help track down Richie. They have a discussion about what was said that previous night where Mr. Hawkins confronts Foley. He calls him an ignorant bigot that's blind to the world moving forward. He also says Richie doesn't like his own dad, and because of that, he'll never truly get to have a good relationship with his own son. Then he says, Richie ran away from you a long time ago, and who can blame him?
Richie ran away from you a long time ago, Foley. And who can blame him?
Let him know. Let him know. That dad was eating with that one.
Long story short, a fight breaks out between the villains and the dads, trying to save Richie, though are incapable of doing so. Then Static comes in to save the day, and Mr. Foley is extremely grateful that his son was saved by, you know,
a black superhero.
The episode ends with Mr. Foley, Virgil, and Richie all heading to Comic-Con, and the father's attitude is noticeably different, treating Virgil as he would anyone else. I really like how the
I don't know if I can believe it that quick.
The dad being racist just as big a problem as supervillains, and they don't.
You can't just become, you know, not racist that quick, bro. I don't know, bro. In my personal opinion, once a racist, always a racist. Like, nobody changes that quick, man. He's gonna go right back to saying these damn coon, the watermelon spitting seeds, spear chucking. He's gonna go right back to saying that after like all of this. I just you know got saved by a black superhero wears off. He's gonna go back to factory default, straight up.
Don't shove it in your face either. It was genuinely a good life lesson that was approached in a calmly and mature manner. I see why the show was heavily praised. Dwayne McDuffie, one of the 2 creators of the original Static Shock comics, focused heavily on giving minorities an important role in pieces of media.
Oh, yeah.
Fun fact, since we're talking about Static Shock, they actually had a gun PSA and a dyslexia PSA. In the dyslexia one, they tell kids to not be afraid to tell an adult if they're having trouble reading, and they're no less than anyone else. And the gun PSA is a bit more morbid, showing a little girl placing a rose on a tombstone.
Damn, they be getting real like that?
That's So Raven, Season 3, Episode 10, True Colors. That's So Raven aired on Disney Channel for 4 seasons from 2003 to 2007. It was about a teenage girl, Raven, dealing with the average problems of the youth. But there was a twist. She could see into the future. I always personally thought that was a little bit corny, but the show was a huge success, so fuck me, right? Anyway, Season 3, Episode 10, True Colors begins with the Baxter family cooking up soul food in celebration of Black History Month. And Raven announces that she and her best friend Chelsea are going to be applying to a store in their local mall known as Sesame.
Yeah, I remember this.
And are met with multiple tasks.
She says,
so the manager
because
gets an
I don't
idea
like
who would be a good employee. Raven does everything right, and Chelsea fucks every single challenge up. At the same time, Corey is supposed to be writing a 500-page essay on a historic black figure, but finds it boring. So Mr. Baxter encourages him to be more enthusiastic about his race. We cut to the next day at school where Chelsea gets a phone call from the Sassy's manager,
but
and
Raven doesn't
finding
get
out she
the
got
job.
Then she asks about Raven and is told that she didn't. Raven gets a vision, and the manager can be heard saying this:
I don't like black people.
The truth is, I don't hire black people.
They got real,
Chelsea decides
bro.
to quit for obvious reasons.
Disney got
Meanwhile,
real.
Corey falls asleep at his desk,
Love
and
that.
his dad, dressed up as Frederick Douglass, comes out of his computer. At first watch, I was like, what the fuck am I watching? But then I remembered, oh yeah, Corey fell asleep. I just wish they transitioned into his dream better. Literally a vortex transition would have done the job. Anyway, Corey is taught about a lot of black figures that should be respected due to their contribution to America's history. Now back to Raven. She explains to her parents that she didn't get the job because the manager just doesn't like black people. They try to come up with a plan to get the manager fired, but realize they have no evidence other than Raven's vision. So she comes up with a plan to record her saying it and submit it to the news. She quickly calls Chelsea and tells her not to quit and instead wear a hat with a camera in it. While working, Raven comes in with a disguise, and this is where the vision took place. The manager is then caught being racist. Once that happens, we cut to the television where the news anchor explains the manager has been fired and the company issued a public apology.
Truth is, I don't hire black people.
Get her out of here. Get her out of here.
Oh, and Corey also got the essay done out of passion rather than being forced by his school. I think the episode did a great job capturing how easily people can be racist and how heavily it can affect the recipient. For example, not being able to get a job. Though I never got into That's So Raven because I was too young. My older sister loved the show and I remember bits and pieces here and there, and it was a pleasant surprise to see how they chose to tackle racism in this episode.
So if this was like current times where, you know, you have social media and all that, literally all you would need to do is just make a tweet about that store manager and the internet would have ended their career. Their whole entire lives would have been emailing, calling, wherever they worked at, getting them fired from their jobs, just completely destroying their lives. Now, I don't know if I'm a fan of that or if I'm against it, but at the same time, like, why do I care if a racist, you know, gets fired from their job? That's just me personally, man. You don't like a whole race of people, I don't think you should be working where, you know, anybody can just walk in, you know, get service. If I'm black, I don't want to walk into a place that doesn't want to hire black people. You get what I'm trying to say? You know, like, we're all on this planet together. Why can't we just get along?
Oh, it is so
That's so Raven. It's
Sesame Street, season 25,
Sesame
episode 5,
Street?
Racism on Sesame Street. I don't really think Sesame Street needs an introduction, so I'm not gonna do one. But we're gonna be talking about season 25, episode 5, Racism on Sesame Street, which aired on November 26th, 1993. The whole episode is actually available on YouTube, but it's split into 2 parts.
And this was way back then.
The episode starts off with Gina and Savian walking around Sesame Street and having some innocent fun. Then they walk into a shop, which I'm gonna assume Gina has some ownership of, and they're startled to be receiving an anonymous phone call telling them that people of different skin colors can't be friends. They assume it's a random bystander that saw them outside, so they explain to Telly, the Muppet, that there are some stupid people in this world, and Telly is confused as to why this is a conversation to have in the first place.
Yeah, he's
then
a
Telly
Muppet.
asks what they would do if that person calls again, and they mock the idea of it happening by making a fart sound.
I don't think that's enough. I need you to go off on that.
Remember, guys, this is a toddler show.
Yeah,
Then the story moves on to a different plot revolving around Telly and his friend Baby Bear. Telly is telling Baby Bear about what happened, and again, they're both confused. And in kids show fashion, they sing a song about being best friends. It's pretty cute. The reason they're hanging out together is because they set up an information shop where they sell information about anything for 1 penny. Gina comes by and nothing really notable happens besides a monologue about a stereotype that girls should be more scared of things than boys. The episode ends with Gina and Savion looking at the Sesame Street apartments, wondering if the anonymous guy is watching them. So they decide to loudly sing the best friend song, hoping that the racist will see. You know, since this show is for smaller kids, I'd say they did a good job here. If it was for teens,
bust
it
through a window and be like, "Stop that!"
So that the anonymous racist has no argument, which means we only get to see Telly's side of confusion and Gina and Savion's reasoning that it's just the product of bad people.
We never
During
see the
year
racist.
of 2020, Sesame Street continued to push the anti-racism agenda due to the problems going on at the time. The videos I watched were honestly pretty innocent and educational, which confused me on the amount of dislikes they got. Though comments were disabled, so I couldn't check out any opinions. I decided to go to the source of the video, which was CNN's Twitter, which has 11 million views, and I was able to gather a glimpse of the negative comments. This is why I'm gonna assume the videos talking about racism have dislikes, but I also found these wholesome images too.
I remember them riots.
The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, season 1, episode 6.
Oh, my boy Will Smith.
Identity. I didn't grow up with this show, but I didn't know Will Smith played Will Smith in this show. Anyway, the show follows Will Smith with this show, but I didn't know Will Smith played Will Smith in this show. In season 1, episode 6, Mistaken Identity, the episode begins with Uncle Phil and his wife Vivian going to a retreat in Palm Springs. They break the news to the kids that they're staying at home. Carlton is extremely innocent, and Will is telling him what not to do, and he just ignores him. He takes out his license and registration and says that the car isn't his, by the way, which prompts the officer to tell him to get out the car, as he's saying more than he should to the cops, which just makes their story seem fake.
Worlds apart, man.
Suspicions that the
Y'all gotta realize, like, in the show, Will Smith grew up in a different way than Carlton grew up. Like, Carlton grew up in where they live in? I don't know, somewhere in California. They lived in the rich part of California. Bel Air. There we go. Fresh Prince of Bel Air. They lived in Bel Air, man. Like, they had the house, they had like the golf parties, I don't even know. I never grew up in a rich, affluent neighborhood like that. But they're worlds apart. So when you ever pulled over by a cop, listen to your cousin that, has been around the block a couple times.
These 2 black males stole the car. They get a chance to make a phone call, so they call the boss's wife, and she mistakes "I'm in jail" for "I'm in Yale." She then later hangs up and tells Carlton's parents that he got into Yale, leaving them confused. Then the duo end up getting thrown in a cell, and Will comes up with a plan to only confess to the crimes they didn't commit if a camera crew shows up and broadcasts it. Uncle Phil and his wife end up seeing this as it interrupts the football game everyone was watching at the retreat, and they go to the station demanding the kids are set free.
Wouldn't you stop it?
I asked myself that question the first time I was stopped. Good night, son.
Profiled. We fade to black and the credits roll.
2 miles per hour? Yeah.
It's
I would
just
pull your stupid ass over.
Honestly,
too.
It's an extremely real look at what it could be like
man.
finding out that you're in the minority. Not only that, but realizing the fact that your life is going to be a lot harder than it should be. I really like this.
See, as a black man, like, we learned that shit when we were younger, bro. We learned that shit when you're. I think I like, obviously I knew I was black from the get-go, but like, I think it finally occurred to me that black people get treated differently. Maybe around the time I was like in 4th or 5th grade. Like, it finally dawned upon me that, debatably our lives will be harder, Not everybody's gonna want to hear that.
I always like, and I'm sure many of you do too, when shows get serious, especially when there's not a happy ending. It's only real life. If you guys are interested, make sure to go look it up and watch it. It's a really good watch. Arthur, Season 21, Episode 4, Arthur Takes a Stand. Arthur aired on PBS from 1994 to 2022. Yeah, it barely ended last year. That's fucking crazy. Though the show did go on several hiatuses, so it wasn't active for a couple of those years.
Too?
The show takes place in the fictional city of Elwood and focuses on 3rd grade student Arthur the Aardvark and his other anthropomorphic friends. In Season 21, Episode 4, which came out in 2017, the principal announces that breakfast will now be served in the cafeteria along with the lunch. The kids are excited, but after Arthur comes back due to forgetting his notebook, he realizes that the lunch lady, Mrs. McGrady, has no one to help her and is being overworked.
Aww.
He's shocked and says that the school needs to hire more helpers, but she says she's already attempted, but heard no response back. So Arthur goes to the principal and tells her Mrs. McGrady deserves some more help, which she just ignores. She's too distracted by breakfast doing so good. And I don't know if the principal having white skin and Mrs. McGrady having brown skin had a role to play in this, so I don't want to make an assumption about that, but it's definitely something I was wondering while watching. Arthur talks to Sue on his way home about the situation, and she suggests the idea of boycotting until something is done. Here she mentions figures like Martin Luther King and John Lewis. So then in the library, a cartoon version of John Lewis appears and gives Arthur a talk about standing his ground. Between you and me, I feel like they could have given John Lewis a less human face.
Right?
And Arthur,
they
his
have him
friends,
the nigga
and
list and
Mrs.
everything.
McGrady all choose to not leave their lunch tables until something is done. The principal comes in and tries to shut everything down in an annoyed fashion, but the group doesn't budge. It's only until John Lewis spawns in that the principal guarantees she'll contact the school board as soon as possible. The episode then ends, and this one was different from the others I've talked about. This one focused more so on the response to being mistreated, of course in a non-violent way. Boycotting has worked in the past as a peaceful protest method, so I don't see why anyone would get mad that your kids are being taught to stand up for what they believe in a peaceful way. This is another good episode, which tackled the very hard subject of responding to prejudice in a non-violent way. I still think this portrayal of John Lewis could have been a lot better. Jesus.
Creepy as hell, bro. All right, so that was racism approached in cartoons, man, and hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys learned a little something today, man, and I do respect these cartoons for including something like that, man, because, you know, people don't like talking about it, people don't like hearing about it, but it exists. Definitely does it.